Nostalgia is a powerful thing. Everyone has a period they look upon fondly through rose-colored glasses. And for kids growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I think nothing hits that nostalgic itch quite like VHS tapes of old cartoons. The softened edges and fuzziness of the audio, reflecting the fuzzy nature of memories and the times we spent with them. Many different shows absolutely thrived during this period on VHS, ranging from major releases from network television to small independent productions with a tiny animation team. There are dozens of obscure, low-budget properties that come off as nostalgic to those who grew up with them. And while nostalgia is typically utilized to give the viewer a warm and fuzzy feeling of days gone by, it also has another purpose. Anyone familiar with the internet's dynamic with popular characters and series knows that there is a very large market of people attracted to the corruption of said nostalgia. Internet horror icons like Sonic.EXE or Ben Drowned are stories that have stuck around on the internet for far longer than anyone could have predicted. Sonic.exe is still highly relevant, with original fan games and mods that utilize the character releasing to this day. And Ben Drowned has had dozens of adaptations and sequels made by different creators online. I think the biggest reason these characters have stuck around is due to the internet's love of nostalgic horror. Horror themed around old games and shows and everything that people love about them. The fuzziness that was once attributed to warm memories is now used to obscure images and mess with your brain. Audio warmth that once brought comfort is now a vessel to bring authentic indie horror to life. And the latest example I've seen in this genre, and subject of today's video, is the horror game Amanda the Adventurer. Amanda the Adventurer is one part riff on edutainment shows and games from the 90s, and one part a puzzle-solving escape room. The edutainment segments, aside from the obvious inspiration, are heavily based on edutainment games from the era and start off innocent enough before...
I want to get my friend a special treat. I want to get my friend a special treat. Let me out of here!
Oh, Amanda, that's a nice birthday card.
Things start to go wrong. You play as Riley Park, and the game starts you inside the attic of Riley's Aunt Kate, who recently passed. This place will be where you spend the entirety of the game's runtime. You have a VHS tape of the titular series and a TV, but before I go into that, let's look at your surroundings. The attic itself is littered with Easter eggs and secrets and small details that set the time period and add to the nostalgic atmosphere of the game. The ambient audio in the background contains creaks and rocks back and forth with a storm going on outside, further adding to the creepy atmosphere of the place in which you play this game. Toy piano, an old doll, odd plastic robot, and other assorted kids' toys. All of these are incredibly common nostalgic sights for people that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. Across the room, you'll find several locks attached to various chests and drawers, which, if you've ever played an escape room, seem familiar, although just by looking around, you're not going to find the clues to progress. So, that's where the tapes come in. Your progression within the escape room portion of the game is tied to the choices you make within your interactions with the tapes. Tapes can have multiple outcomes or choices in them that will either set up a simple puzzle for the player to do, or give the player hints to get past the locks. The locks have items that help you progress towards one of the game's several endings. Every time you finish the game, each ending will guide the player forward and encourages more and more experimentation within the tapes and how you interact with them. Thinking outside the box is encouraged here. Speaking of which, let's talk about the tapes. Dingy lighting, a CRT, and awkward early 3D animation. Yup, this is prime material for analog horror. Analog horror, horror with a focus on old media and recordings with particular VHS stylings, has exploded online within the past few years. There have been dozens upon dozens of creators that have made this into a respectable horror format on the internet. And though many people can find the format cheap or easy to imitate, there have been consistent and constant innovation and improvement from a variety of creators. Kane Pixels, Martin Wells, Baddington, and Alex Kister, favorites of mine, and I highly recommend their channels if this type of content appeals to you. Although, be warned, the content on these channels is far darker and gruesome than most of the content found in Amanda the Adventurer, so just keep that in mind when looking up these creators. Amanda the Adventurer innovates analog horror by mixing the typical VHS video format and mashing it with an interactive edutainment games from the 90s and 2000s. Many of these games were released by Disney and other family-oriented companies and would feature cutesy characters and would teach you basic problem solving, perhaps share life lessons, or simply have bright colors and objects for kids to click on. I grew up with several of these, and at the beginning of Amanda, I felt a nice nostalgic warmth in my heart as I was reminded of those games. Until it was destroyed almost immediately by the ever-increasing amount of disturbing moments throughout the tapes. It's not all horror all the time, though. The tapes have enough effort into presenting themselves authentically and even have some genuine comedic moments to offset the horror.
Hi, friends. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Wooly.
What do you like best about your neighborhood? That's great!
A lot of the charm from these tapes is reflected in the awkward early 3D it's emulating. Shows like Reboot or early VeggieTales have a cheap, uncanny vibe to them that is isolated and made even worse by Amanda and her disturbing comments from time to time.
Sometimes I feel myself rotting, but it feels far away.
Excellently delivered by her voice actress Blair Green Osako, also known as B-Moon VA. She sets the tone perfectly by contrasting her cheeriness with an authentic existential horror hidden just below the surface. And she isn't the only great performance in the game, as there are hidden tapes that can be unlocked by experimenting with secrets in the Amanda segments. These tapes portray entire live-action sequences with their own casts of actors that help build the lore and world behind Amanda and the circumstances of her creation. There's a lot here to discover and a lot to love, and I've never played a horror game that plays out quite like Amanda, and I highly recommend you try it out yourself. There's tons of hidden details and several endings that I haven't talked about in this video, and the game itself is only $8.99 on Steam. Channels like Game Theory have started to cover the game as well, but even videos like that don't fully divulge the secrets of the game. So even if you've watched several theory videos or gameplay videos, there's still some value to be found in playing it yourself. I'm not certain if a sequel is in the works, however the game's final ending seems to imply that there is. So I will be looking forward to more from Amanda and Mangled Maw Games. Thank you all for watching, and next time, let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. Hey everyone, sorry for the delay on getting this video out. I wanted to get it out sooner, but I was still kinda figuring out my video editing pipeline. From now on, uploads should be far more consistent, and I'll be incorporating a variety of different games. Fan games, indie horror, mods, texture packs, things like that. So if you're interested in that kind of content, consider subscribing. I was absolutely blown away by the reception of my last video, and I'm looking forward to creating more content for you guys. Have a good one.